start embodying it and start showing your daughter other examples of what it means to be a woman. She gets all these examples in the media and society of what it looks like to be a woman. Can you show her a different example of what it looks like to be a woman?
Welcome to the Marriage and Motherhood podcast. I'm your host, Michelle Perda. As a marriage coach who's married with 3 kids, I know how much parenthood could change a marriage. If flirting, laughing, and having fun together feels like a thing of the past, then I'm here to teach you that marriage doesn't have to feel so hard with your parents, and your marriage can thrive even when you're in the season of raising kids. Whether you're in a good place in your marriage and you just want to continue growing together, or you're wondering if you even like your spouse anymore, this podcast has something for you. Join me here each week as we dive into what it takes to help your marriage grow and maybe even do a 180. You'll learn ways to handle conflict better, bring that spark back into your relationship, as well as learn how to improve other areas of your life from my lovely guest experts. Are you ready for the next stage of your life in marriage? Let's dive in. Hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Marriage and Motherhood podcast. Today's episode is a special one that you're going to want to probably re-listen to over and over again because it's a topic that we haven't touched on yet. And this is especially for moms with daughters, especially moms with daughters who are teenagers and soon to be teenagers and future teenagers like myself, because my daughter's only 4 right now. But we're going to be diving into how we can empower our daughters to be the woman that we wish we were taught to be and weren't learning the hard way to be. And that's about your menstrual cycle. That's about how to be a woman and feel empowered to do so, and how we can support them in their well-being as they journey through the tough transition of being a teenager and becoming a woman and all of that. And we're doing all that with my lovely guest here, Tori Milner. Thank you so much for being here. Tori is a women's empowerment coach and a teen mentor and menstrual cycle guide. Tori, I know you didn't dream about being this when you were little, so can you fill us in on who you are, where you're from, and what made you want to step into this line of work?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you today. So, when I was growing up, I went through a lot of transitions. We moved around a lot when we were younger. When I was 11, my mother decided to move to the south of France, and so we were kind of learning, we were, went through a lot of big transitions. So this topic of transitions was always something quite big for me. And then when I was in my early 20s and I was kind of trying to understand more about myself, more about my cycle, I discovered fertility awareness and tracking your menstrual cycle. And it truly changed my life. It really changed the way that I saw myself as a woman. And I was sitting there, I remember sitting there at university reading this book and being like, why isn't everybody talking about this? Like, why doesn't everybody know this? So that's how it started. And then I was just like, I just want everybody to know this. And I wish I'd known this like 5 years earlier. I wish I'd known this when I was a teenager so that I could have made different decisions. So I could have understood myself a little bit more. So then that's when the mission started of like, okay, it's time to teach our teenagers. It's time to empower our teenagers with the wisdom that we didn't really have when we were growing up.
Oh my gosh. My entry into womanhood, if we're, gauging it off of having your first cycle, my mom was on her honeymoon with my stepdad and I was with my dad. I
Oh,
had no prior conversation about periods. And I think when she got back, she's like, okay, here are some pads, period.
yeah.
Like no further discussion. And I truly didn't really learn about the power of cycle syncing, and which I'm sure Tori's going to get into later, until recently. And I'm almost 40, Tori. Okay. I didn't learn this until maybe my mid 30s. And I really wish I knew this earlier because we so often compare ourselves to men and their energy cycles, right? If you are a Listener of the show, you've heard me mention that men's cycle are operated over 24 hours. They go to sleep and they're like, I am a brand new person. I have the same amount of energy as the day before, unless they're sick or, stressed or whatever. Whereas females are not the same. Listening into this show for the first time, or maybe haven't heard me talk about the power of cycle syncing, can you share with them what we mean by that? What do we mean by really utilizing our cycle to our benefit and working with it instead of just viewing our cycle as, it's that time of the month. I'm going to be bloated, cramping. I just need to sit down and eat chocolate and feel lazy, but experience guilt for not being productive. Can you let us know what all that means and how we can do it better so that we can stop, feeling bad about ourselves and shaming ourselves for not being more like men when really we're completely different people?
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And just before I go into all that, I know that your experience of like, your first period, it is so common. I've heard that
Mm-hmm.
story so many times. And so it's just, yeah, just to normalize that, yeah, this is very normal. That this is our first experience of our periods. And so therefore it's also normal that we don't think anything more about it, that it doesn't become an important part of our lives because it hasn't been given that importance during that rite of passage. So if we're talking about cycle syncing, so like you said, we don't have a 24-hour cycle. Instead, we have, our monthly cycle. So we are more like the seasons or more like the moon, where we're really going through very different phases depending on which cycle phase we're in, very different energy depending on which cycle phase we're in. So we have four cycle phases. We have the menstrual phase where we're bleeding, then we have the follicular phase where our body is starting to get ready to ovulate. Then we have our ovulation when, it's like this big burst of energy with our egg being released and we're ovulating. And then we have our luteal phase, which is kind of that dreaded time of the month where you get PMS and all the, moody mood swings. So these are kind of our four cycle phases. And like I said, we can connect them to the energies of the seasons. So the menstrual phase is like winter, so the winter energy turning inwards, slowing down. The follicular phase is like the spring, where things are starting to grow, but we're not in like full energy. It's like slowly starting to come out of our cave. Then we've got the summer, which is ovulation, where it's like party time, everything's
So
alive.
amazing. Like, we are
Yeah,
so energetic, so on fire, so like magnetic, everything. You're like, oh, I am so awesome.
exactly. Yeah, it's amazing. And then we have the luteal phase, which is like the autumn, where again, we're starting to slow down again. We're releasing things, we're letting go of things. And each phase has a superpower. Each phase has an energy that we can connect to. And when we're living in alignment with those energies, so then it's like we're creating this ball of energy where it just keeps, we're really living in alignment with our natural harmony. But then when we're not, this is when maybe we'll experience more frustration and irritation during our luteal phase, or we'll feel exhausted, or we'll have more of the symptoms. And this is often when we're living out of alignment with our natural cycle. So, yes.
Yeah, and living in the current society, which I will say is better than earlier ones, we are still very much prizing productivity and go, 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 go. And I know a lot of moms experience burnout. And until we learn what we are not capable, because we are capable of doing so many things, but
Yeah.
what we have the capacity for, which is different, until we learn that, we're going to continue to perpetuate this cycle and pass it down to other generations and say, hey, this is what it looks like to be a valuable woman, to be a valuable person. And we just must do, 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 do. And so, are you noticing, since your clients are moms as well as teenage girls, women, pre women, I don't know,
Yes.
What are some common challenges that you are seeing in teenagers today regarding their well being? Because I know that mental health is a relatively new concept to be aware of and to be conscious of and make changes for to support. But what are you noticing in, the younger generations right now, and what kind of support are they needing from us, whether we are current teen moms or teenager moms or, future teenager moms?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I think, firstly, some of the main things that I'm seeing are kind of common. It's not just in teenagers, but kind of in women in general, which is definitely an increase in things like anxiety and depression. This is so, like, so many teens are coming to me these days struggling with anxiety and depression. And a lot of this is coming from social pressure. So, exactly what you were just speaking to of this pressure of being productive all the time, this burnout. And again, kind of for me, how I see it is this living in misalignment with our natural cycle. And then it creates these difficult emotions that many are struggling with. So yeah, anxiety and depression are big ones. And then struggling with social ties, social connections. So struggling with making friends or how to keep friends. And this is really connected to knowing your values. So what do you value in life? Who are you? Who is your tribe? What do you connect to? So it's really, for me, it's the teenage years are a really difficult time for knowing who you are. It's this kind of identity shift. We're really trying to discover who we are in this world, who do we belong to. So during these years, these are kind of the struggles that we can go through. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm feeling lonely. I don't know who I am. I'm feeling disconnected from my body. I don't know what's going on in my body. My body is changing. Everything is out of my control. I start growing breasts, but maybe they're a little bit wonky and one's growing a bit more than the other. And maybe I start getting pimples and maybe I'm smelling a bit. And it's like all these things that are out of our control. And so this is such a big experience for teenagers is this feeling of, wow, I don't have control over what's going on right now. This feeling of being completely overwhelmed with all these changes, not really knowing what's happening and not really knowing how to control your experience. So one way that I really found to support teenagers in this experience. I actually did my dissertation, like I studied psychology and I went and studied like teenagers' experiences of when they're getting their menstrual cycle. And from their mouths, what they told me was the importance of having the information, so the informative support, as well as having the kind of social emotional support. And for these things to be coming together, so yes, they can go to Google and they can, Google or TikTok or wherever they're going to get their information, they can go online and find the information, but they're not receiving that information in a supportive environment. And maybe they can be supported and loved by their mother or their sister, but they won't necessarily have the information to offer them because the mothers were never taught the information
Right.
themselves. So they really shared that for them, it's so important for them to have the information and the like loving support together, and that this really helped them with their experience. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is really menstrual cycle tracking because it really truly does give us a sense of understanding of what's going on in our bodies. So it's we finally feel like, oh, this isn't happening to me. This is happening for me. Like I'm a part of this experience. I'm not just watching on the sideline of like what is going on in my body. I'm participating. I'm experiencing it. I'm connecting to it. So those are for me two key points, the menstrual cycle tracking and really having that intimate connection with your own cycle and spaces where they can receive information in a really loving, nurturing environment.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, like I said, my daughter's 4, And I think ever since she was 3, I started talking about my period, just like whenever, because she walked in, as they do, while I was in the bathroom. And she was like, "Oh my gosh, are you okay, mommy?" I was like, "No, I'm fine." This happens every month when you get older. You're going to have this too. And all this means is that I'm not having a baby. And when I had you and your brother, I didn't get this because, I was growing you and it was your home. So this is going to keep happening until I'm older. And you're going to have this too. It's fine. I'm not hurt. She was really concerned
Well,
that I was hurt because that's how we, relate to blood is, oh my gosh, pain or, injury of some sort. And so I think it's so beautiful that you said that, the menstrual cycle is happening for us. And until you said that, I never looked at it that way. I just thought, oh, well, it just happens and we can utilize information from it. But just you saying that makes me think of how beautiful it is to get this monthly reminder to assess how are we living right now? Are we living in alignment with the phase that we're in, the season that we're in? Like not just menstrual phase or season, but season of life. Like as we get older, we have different things that are priorities to us and we have different capacity to handle things. When I was in my 20s, I could go and party and have fun and do all the things. And now that I am, almost 40, I've got kids, we've got activities, we've got home improvement projects, all that. I've got my husband. It's like things are starting to fall away that I'm noticing that were a part of my life that no longer have a place or as high of a priority. And I'm truly starting to prioritize what really matters to me. And how awesome is it that every time we have our cycle, we get into that reflective phase where we're like, we slow down and we start to think about, oh, that really doesn't, we get a little more sensitive to things that bother us. And instead of being like, oh, I'm just being, a bitch right now, it's like, no, actually, this is showing how I really feel. And I've just been hiding it because for whatever reason, being a people pleaser or not wanting to make things uncomfortable or not wanting to deal with my own emotions. Like, there's so many reasons. So, how do you recommend to moms to talk about this kind of stuff in a way where it's like, yeah, this is empowering. This is happening for you. How do you recommend to moms to start talking about cycles in this light rather than, yeah, it kind of sucks. It's just something we got to deal with as a woman.
yeah, that's such a great question. And it's such a great reflection, right? It's really something that we have to rewrite a new narrative. It's like it's up to us now. It's like this was has never been done before, so what are we doing now to change it? So firstly, what I would say is before even talking about it, are you embodying it yourself? Like, can you learn this information, this wisdom, this connection for yourself and start implementing it, start embodying it, and start showing your daughter other examples of what it means to be a woman? Like, can you, she gets all these examples in the media and society of what it looks like to be a woman. Can you show her a different example of what it looks like to be a woman? So, just learning to track your cycle yourself, learning and connecting to the different energies. Like you said, that not just the cyclical monthly energies, but your life energy. Like, really start embodying this yourself, and then slowly, slowly, your daughter will start seeing that. She will witness you in that. And then it will just become much more natural. And then you can start, exactly how you shared about with your daughter, how, yeah, just bringing in like really simple things, really I wouldn't say age appropriate because these days girls are bleeding, getting their first period a lot earlier, so more developmentally appropriate. So really trying to understand, okay, maybe my daughter is 10 years old, but actually she's really quite developed already. She's already starting to get some hair, she's already starting to, have breast buds. So, okay, maybe she's really young, but developmentally she's in a place where actually this is the right time to start talking about these things more and more. So, but in really soft, simple ways. And I know that because we were never taught these things, because we never had these conversations, there can be a lot of shame around it and also a lot of like, but I don't know myself. How can I share with my daughter because I don't know myself? And this is why really the first piece is to learn it for yourself, to learn and embody it, and then to listen to your own intuition because you're gonna like the moment that you start feeling it and embodying it, you're gonna know how to talk to your daughter. You don't need me to tell you. You're gonna be in a place where, oh yeah, I know that I want to show my daughter this side of womanhood.
Yeah, yeah. So, to you, what does women empowerment mean? And I know that's what you're all about. And of course, us moms of girls want to empower our daughters to be, everything they want to be, to not have any doubts in their mind, lack of confidence, or any shame about who they are, and really know what they stand for. You spoke about values earlier, right? I didn't even learn about my own personal values until I was in my 30s. And even then, I think I just innately knew who I was and what I stood for. And so I steered clear of a lot of things because of that, but not everyone has that naturally, or not everyone is has that ingrained in them at a young age of like what is important to you and really sticking to who you are and not bending to other people because of peer pressure or whatever. So, what does women's empowerment mean to you? And how can us as women who've had the experience of the transition from child completely relying on your parents to teenager where you're like, okay, I am now detaching myself from them, but I don't know who I am, but I know that I kind of need them still, but I don't need them as much. And I won't need them nearly as much when I'm an adult, but like that weird, awkward phase where also everyone around you is trying to figure that out too. And like, let's be real, middle school is rough, right? High school, rough. It's like we don't feel comfortable being who we are because we want to fit in. We want to do everything we can to fit in so that we can be a part of the crowd and not be ostracized. And I don't know if you've seen Wicked, the movie, yet, or even the musical. It's like, yeah, that is it, right? Like you feel weird. You want to fit in so that you can feel worthy and have that define who you are as a person, or like if you are, I don't know, I guess like worthy really is all encompassing in this situation, right? So how can we empower them more, and what can we do to support our own journey to help them? Because I know that's in itself a thing too, right? Because we as moms are busy and we want the best for them. So how do we fit in without feeling like burnout, that we are just continuing to stretch ourselves thin for every single person, whether it's our partner or our kids or for work or ourselves or friends or family? I know that was a lot, but I'm just like thinking, we always think about other people. How can we do this in a way that honors ourselves too and we don't burn out in the process?
That's such a beautiful question and such a beautiful inquiry. Like, how can we do it where we're still taking care of ourselves? And so, the first thing that I would say, there's a few things that I can say to this, but the first thing would be, and this is for both the moms and the teens, like learning how we can turn inwards, how we can insource versus constantly outsourcing.
Mm.
So for me, this is kind of the key to women's empowerment and to empowerment in general. It is turning back inwards and connecting to our inner power. So a lot of times when we're talking about empowerment, it does feel like it's something we're giving, we're giving the power to somebody, but it's like we're finding the power from within. So during the teenage years, it's very challenging because exactly like you said, we're trying to figure out who we are and middle school, high school, worthiness and all of this. And so it's so, so easy to go outwards. So it's really about how do we go inwards. So how do we find things that help us go inwards? So again, and I'm going to keep, I mean, I sound like a broken record, but again, the menstrual cycle for me, it's a way for me to go inwards and to connect to my inner power. But that is how I do it. And maybe for somebody else, it will be different. Maybe it will look like going and connecting to nature and sitting outside and within the silence, going inwards. So for me, it's really as much as we can go inwards. And also, a huge part is when we're talking about our rites of passage, so the transition times. So when we're transitioning, because you spoke about, the transition of going from a child to an adult. So when we're transitioning into womanhood through firstly our first period, to really honor that. Like if you have a daughter who hasn't yet started bleeding, really have it in your mind of like, okay, I know that this probably wasn't honored when I first started bleeding. It probably wasn't even talked about when I first started bleeding. Can I find a way to honor my daughter when she starts bleeding? Can I find a way to celebrate her? So to really start bringing back the rites of passage. So when we first start bleeding, if, and this, might feel a bit edgy, but when your daughter is old enough and she starts getting into relationships and starts having her sexuality open, can we also celebrate that? And, that's going to be very challenging because sexuality is such a challenging topic, but it's really each time the rites of passage and then the rites of passage of motherhood. Like the amount of power that you gain through motherhood, it's incredible. And it's like, can we bring back the awareness that this is a rite of passage of womanhood? Like, this is something I'm going through that really anchors me more and more into my womanhood. And can I see that as a source of power? And then menopause, it's the same thing. Like, some of the older mothers, as you're approaching menopause, it can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm like losing my womanhood and what's going to happen and all these changes again. And it's like, oh, can I see it again as no, this is a moment of power. This is a moment of transition. This is a rite of passage for me that is helping me explore a new phase of womanhood. So I don't know if I really answered your question, but
No, no, you
um,
did. You did. I mean, I think that it kind of reminds me of how societies used to do it, right? If we go back to, I mean, I'm sure there are still societies that do this, ones that are still very much connected to their ancestry and past ways of doing things, where, the whole process of a rite of passage, where there is actual things that happen, where there's a celebration or something that is significant and meaningful. So I love that idea. And now you got me thinking, what can I do to celebrate my daughter's like future period? Um, so she views it as like, oh yeah, I'm getting older. Cause kids love the idea of getting older. Whereas us, we're like, forever in my 20s. Just kidding. I actually love my 30s. I think that the 40s will be even better. Um, but I love that you offered that mention of menopause, because I am approaching the age where I'm going to be perimenopausal, and I'm like, all I've heard are terrible things about it. So it's a great flip to be like, okay, yeah, there are some uncomfortable parts of that, but what are some things that I can gain through that process? And how can I view it with a more balanced lens versus what often feels like is just a negative light on all of the female experiences, right? Um, anyway, patriarchy. I'm just gonna leave it there. Um, so, what is some appropriate sexual, menstrual, and fertility related things that we can start teaching our young girls to help them view this whole womanhood thing differently than we did growing up, right? Because like for me, like I said, my period was barely a conversation. And then for my, sexual life, thankfully, I had the wisdom to go to Planned Parenthood. I have no idea how, but I did. And I brought myself there and asked all the questions, read all the pamphlets, because that wasn't something to talk about with your parents. It was like, nope, that is Not something you talk about because I'm not supposed to be doing that. Um, and even when I was, quote unquote, old enough to do that, I still didn't have that conversation. It was just like, oh, yeah, you just are. And that's not
We're not
something,
gonna look at it or think
yeah,
about
it's
it.
like out of sight, out of mind. And oh, you're pregnant. Awesome. Um, and I don't want that type of relationship with my daughter. And in fact, listeners, you are in for a treat because I have a sex educational expert coming on as a guest that's going to talk about all that. So stay tuned for that. Um, and yeah, it is kind of an awkward phase right now because we are in the generation where it's like we didn't get that, related to marriage, related to being a parent, related to, our own sexual health and mental health and all of these things. And yet we don't want the same for the next generation. So we're caught in this like messy middle where we're like, well, what do we do? Like we're trying to like fumble around and figure it out so that we don't perpetuate the cycle of this like lack of awareness and having to figure it out on your own, but really building that tribal knowledge and passing it down, stripping it away and going back to how it used to be. It's like just keep passing the knowledge, keep passing the knowledge. Somehow it got lost, and now it's like, oh, now we got to regain this knowledge and pass it on. So how could we educate them in an empowering way that will give them the knowledge that they need, and like you said, the social support that they need, that is non-existent, that we didn't get growing up.
Yeah. So, firstly, I would say that such an important part is to start building the intimacy that we have with our own body and that our daughters can have with their bodies. So we're so used to, again, outsourcing. Like, you know, I remember that my first partner, like, he touched me before I touched myself. And it was like,
Mm-hmm.
no, like, we should have the intimacy with our own bodies before we're going outside. And so it can feel like, oh, if we're talking about sexuality with our teens, with our girls, they're going to do things more quickly or they're going to, be more interested. It's like they're already talking about it in the playground. They have access to social media. Like if we can provide them with healthy and
Accurate.
supportive role models. So, to build the intimacy with our own bodies, and one way that I find really supportive is to teach our girls around about their cervical fluids. So, this is a
Yes.
huge thing around fertility awareness, menstrual cycle tracking, and it's something I didn't know until I started fertility awareness. But I remember having the experience of like my underwear getting wet and thinking I'd started my period. And then I looked down and I hadn't started my period. And I'm like, what is going on? And it was only when I started tracking my cycle that I realized, oh, that was ovulation.
Mm-hmm.
So to have this intimacy with your own fluids, to see, oh, after I start bleeding, I start getting maybe some creamy fluids, and then I start getting more wet fluids that maybe start looking like egg white, and I might feel wet in my underwear, and then it will change again. And to start noticing that, oh, my body changes, and I have this intimacy with my own body, with my own fluids, and this way, she's gaining intimacy with her body and she's also starting to understand her fertility and her natural cycle. She starts understanding, oh, yeah, I'm fertile. I'm a fertile being. It's like I
Mm-hmm.
can get pregnant. So
Mm-hmm.
then, when that's in your awareness, then you start making informed decisions and you take more responsibility. But if you're not aware of these things, you can kind of like, same thing, out of sight, out of mind. Like, oh, I don't really know. So, like, yeah, no, no, no. But no, actually, I know that I ovulate each month. I can feel it. I see it. I need to do something about that if I don't want to get pregnant because I'm going to take responsibility. And I think part of the empowerment is trusting, is providing the support for our teens, for our girls, and trusting that they can take responsibility. So the more knowledge we're giving them and the more conversations we're opening up around this and saying, like, look, I really want to help you take responsibility of your own fertility, of your own sexuality. So let's keep this conversation open. If anything, if you want to come to me about anything, and I know that for mothers who never had these conversations, it can be very challenging and very difficult because you don't necessarily know how to have these conversations. But just the fact that you're open to them, just the fact that you're showing your daughter that you're open to them, it is such a deep act of love. And you can even share with your daughter, look, I might not know everything that you ask me, but if you come and ask me, we can go figure it out together. Like, I will
Mm-hmm.
help you find the right resources, the places that are telling us the correct information so that you know that what you're learning is correct. And so if I don't know, we can go search together.
Yeah.
And yeah,
No, I love that. And, a lot of us, because we didn't learn this growing up, it does feel like, oh gosh, I feel tense when I think about talking about this. And I want you to consider the alternative, right? You can do it feeling uncomfortable, knowing that what you share with them is probably more correct than wherever they're getting their information from. And because they're in the stage of detaching themselves and really latching on to their peers, and friends become more important than family. That's just the honest truth, right? That's just the natural way of becoming an adult. Wouldn't you rather be ahead of it, right? Like, I wish my parents were ahead of it, because then by the time I start hearing things from people, I won't be like, what? Like, I remember in elementary school, maybe fifth grade, someone asked me if I was a virgin. And I was like, I have never heard that word before. I'm not going to let that on, right? I'm like, I have never heard that before. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. I don't know how to answer this. And it was
yeah,
meant to be that kind of question, right? And so no matter what I said, it was going to be funny to them. And that was young. And I will say that's probably on the younger side because I was living in the city in San Francisco. So, you know, it just is the way it is. But I want to make sure that my kids have enough information, factual information, that they can be critical thinkers when it comes to rumors or social media or their friends just talking about stuff that they heard but they have zero idea about, right? I want my voice and my information, my experience and wisdom to be their inner voice, not their friends who are learning things from TikTok. And it's like, okay, not everything on the internet is real or true. And I would hate for them to go into a relationship thinking, oh, well, I can't get pregnant when I'm not ovulating, or I have no idea what ovulation is. And it's just, I'm too young. I'm not going to get pregnant, or, whatever. And so I love that you are focusing on, well, first, get to know yourself so that you can speak from a place of, knowing and wisdom, and then pass on the information to better equip them as if you're teaching them how to drive. Because it doesn't have to be like, oh my gosh, sex, like that's terrible. If you back up and you ask yourself, like, what kind of sex life do you want your child to have? Obviously, not as a child, but like future, right? You wouldn't be like, oh, I don't want them to have any sex. You're probably just focusing, oh, yeah, I want all the grandkids. It's like, okay, well, they need to get there in order to have that. So, like, if you remove the taboo-ness of talking about sex and you think about, what do I want for my daughter? What do I want for my son? Obviously, you want them to have a healthy, enjoyable sex life. You wouldn't want your best friend being like, oh my gosh, sex is the worst. Like, it's not fun. It's painful and it's awful and whatever. It's like, no, you would want them to have a healthy, enjoyable sex life. And that starts with us educating them in the right way and us being, like you said, available and open if they have any questions, not feeling like, I don't know who to run to. Right. So I think that is so important. And I'm so glad that there's someone out there like you who is really helping moms and daughters have that better relationship so that daughters don't have to grow up feeling lost in navigating womanhood.
Yeah, it's such, and just one thing around the navigating womanhood. Like I said before, the change that we're going through our teenage years, this change, this is the experience of being a woman. As women, we are constantly changing.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're showing our daughters that we're also changing, we're also evolving, they get to see, oh, I'm not alone in this experience of change. Look, I have this whole community of women who are all going through changes. We're all going through the same journey together, and we can support each other and learn from each other. And it's really bringing back that kind of community, the red thread, the ties of being a woman and the journey of womanhood that we are going through together.
I'm so glad for my daughter. Like whatever however this turns out, I'm so glad that it's now not a thing to like just keep to yourself, right? It's become more of a acceptable, encouraged, supportive topic to start talking about and scaffold in the information as she gets older so that when she reaches that point it's just like okay, it's like preparing your kids to go to college. You know that they're going to be exposed to parties, even maybe late high school years. So talk to them about what might happen, social pressures. Talk to them about, well, what are you curious about? Can I answer any questions? And setting those conversations up so that they're not put in a situation where they're like, I don't know what to do right now. And also, I'm afraid to talk about it with my parents because I'm going to get grounded. Like for us, we would rather our kids come home safe than them fear, like, get into the car with a drunk driver or drive drunk themselves, or whatever. These are just the realities of growing up and the choices that you're faced with. And, I've definitely made some decisions that I regret, but thankfully I'm still here. And I would hate for that lived experience to die with me. I want that to get passed on so they can learn from my mistakes and hopefully make better ones.
Yeah, for sure. And I think the thing we have to remember is like just like what you've said now is most of the time they're going to do these things anyway. They're going to go to parties, they're going to have relationships, they're going to do them anyway. So can we provide the support? And I remember my father, he once told me, he was like, look, if you want to drink or you want to smoke, you can come to me and I'll give you a drink and
Yes.
I'll smoke with you. Like, I much prefer, if you're going to do this anyway, please come to me so that I can make sure that you're safe while you're doing this.
Yep.
Because I do not want you to be doing this alone at a party. So it's like, can we provide, obviously not encouraging them to do these things, but being
Right.
like, look, if at some point this is something that you're going to do and you want to do, please make sure that you're doing it in a safe environment and know that we are here for you because it's much better that they do it with you at home, that they have their first drink at home, that they see that maybe it's not a feeling that they enjoy, or they see that, okay, maybe this is not for when I'm this age, rather than going and doing it at a party on their own. Like, how can we start opening up the spaces that they know that they can do the things that they are going to do in their teenage years anyway, but in a safe environment?
No, absolutely. I'm like full agreement. And we have a soon to be 15-year-old. So we're already starting to have conversations about, okay, what timing? Because I would hate for him to go to college not knowing what he can handle and find
Mhm.
himself in a very compromising situation, right? I want him to get to college and be like, oh, I haven't been locked in a cage and now I'm like this wild animal who like feels the need to like go to the extreme. He's just like, no, I know what this does and I'm either not interested or I am interested and I know when to stop. Or
Yeah.
oh, I'm feeling sick and I need to go home. Like and help him make better decisions for himself, not feel like, oh, I gotta keep up with my friend because I don't want to look uncool. It's more like, well, you can look uncool and be safe and healthy, or you can prioritize other things. So it all goes back to knowing yourself and that level of awareness, which they need to be encouraged to reflect on. And I love that, again, bringing back to the menstrual cycle, that could be brought in at an earlier age without even alluding to when it's going to be most important to them. But when the time comes, it's like, oh yeah, I already know that. Oh, I can apply to this too. So
Yeah.
all of this is so, so useful. And I want to thank you for sharing all this information. And I know that you have a new course for moms and daughters, which is really interesting. I haven't heard that before. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah, so with a colleague who is a mother and also in this work, we've built together an online course for mothers and daughters to do together. So it's really kind of, we've built it as the foundational course for womanhood. So everything around puberty, the menstrual cycle, fertility, everything we've discussed today, consent, boundaries, emotional well-being, really like everything that we wish we had learned when we were in our teenage years. And it's for mothers and daughters to do together, or, a big sister and a younger sister, auntie and niece. Like, it doesn't have to be mothers and daughters, but kind of an elder woman and a younger woman to do together, to learn together. So for the mums who feel a bit lost, who don't really know a lot of this information themselves, who have never really connected to their own menstrual cycle, we've really built it as a journey for mothers to go on themselves as well, so that the daughters, just as I was saying earlier, the daughters can see that their mothers are embodying this and then they can learn from that. So we really felt that it was important to start creating more spaces for mothers and daughters to learn this together and to support the mothers who never got supported themselves. So it will also be a journey for your inner teenager of like, okay, I never learned this as a teenager. I can learn it now and I can kind of heal that part of me that didn't get this information when she should have.
It sounds like a great bonding experience too, because it will bring some of the, older woman's um, humanity into it. Because I think we often look up to people and be like, oh, you know everything, you're flawless, you've never made these mistakes, or you've never gone through these like awkward times. Like, no, you very much did. And so I love that you create this with your partner, because I'm sure it'll make for a lot of really interesting conversations and also healing. Because as we talk about our
Yeah.
experiences, it kind of just like buttons that part up. It's like that was left open, and it closes it up for us. It gives us that closure for that very, I don't know, raw, uncomfortable experience. So I'm so glad that you created that course and put that out there. What is a course called, and where can people connect with you best?
Yeah, so the course is called Blooming Women.
Oh,
So yeah, because we are blooming women.
yeah.
So you can find the course online, bloomingwomen.org. So all the information and the registration is there. And you can find me, my name is Tori Milner, so you can find me on Instagram at Tori Milner, or my website is torimilnercoaching.com. So that's how you can find me. And yeah, feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. This conversation is inspiring me so much to start thinking about how can I start really curating my daughter's experience becoming a woman, even though she's only 4. But I'm excited. I get to be a huge part of this, and why not be a part of it instead of just letting her fend for herself? Like, that doesn't seem as fun. So, thank you so much for being a guest. Listeners, if you made it all the way to the end, you are incredible. And I know that you, like me, want the best for your daughter. So, go check out Tori's class and go connect with her on Instagram. And if you know someone that could benefit from listening to this, send this episode to them. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Tori. Let her know what you loved most about this episode and that you found her from my show. And I would so appreciate it if you left a review if you are loving what you're hearing on this show so far. And that's it. Thank you again, Tori. I loved having you on as a guest, and thank you for sharing what you do and how you help women and their daughters. And I'll catch you all back here on the next episode. Bye. That's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did, please send me a message over on Instagram at Michelle Perta Coaching to let me know what you loved most about it. Hearing from my listeners is my absolute favorite. And if you've been loving this podcast, please leave a rating and review. This will help people like you find the show and get the help they need. Catch you here on the next episode. Bye.